Good afternoon, professors, TAs, and all. I am Austin too, and today I will be delving into the various topics and concepts taught throughout the semester's curriculum, and using them to explore the question, how has Singapore survived and thrived in a world dominated by global powers? So, this is the flow of my presentation today. I will be covering the three isms concepts and using them to explain the various strategies employed by Singapore to not only survive but thrive in a world where we are dwarfed in size, strength, and influence. So, in the hierarchical structure of international politics, small states occupy a precarious position. Small states lack the luxury of great powers, often lacking the material resources, military capabilities, and economic independence. They also face a structural vulnerability due to their material and resource weakness, where they are disproportionately affected by external shocks, regional conflicts, and shifts in great power politics. Singapore, by material definitions, is a small state, with a meager land area of 740 kilometers square and a population of roughly 6 million, while also being resource scarce and highly dependent on global trade. So, the question begs, in a world dominated by global superpowers like the US and China, how do small states like Singapore ensure their sovereignty and security is maintained? So firstly, through a realism lens, the world and its international system is anarchic in nature, rife with uncertainty and instability. Without the presence of a global policeman in the international system, it's imperative that states prioritize their own self-interest and security in order to maintain their sovereignty. So to ensure no state gains an overwhelming advantage in power, states will seek to balance each other out. However, as small states like Singapore are unable to internally balance to keep up with the great powers, their survival depends on how they manage relations with the great powers. So a strategy that Singapore has used to manage these relations is hedging, which involves maintaining positive relations with multiple rival powers to avoid an overdependence on any single one. So Singapore's strategic environment is shaped by the rivalry between the US and China, the two dominant powers of the 21st century. So Singapore exemplifies this hedging strategy, maintaining robust defense and security ties with the US while simultaneously cultivating deep economic relations with China. So the US remains Singapore's key security partner, as a founding member of the five power defense arrangements with the UK, Australia, New Zealand, and Malaysia. Singapore anchors its deterrence position in multilateral defense cooperation. It allows the US naval vessels to use its facilities and hosts the US Navy and participates in joint military exercises. So these arrangements signal an alignment with the US-led liberal order and ensures Singapore gains a continued access to advanced defense technology and intelligence. At the same time, China is Singapore's largest trading partner and a central pillar of its economic success. So Singapore was one of the earliest ASEAN members to establish diplomatic relations with China in 1990 and has supported initiatives like the Belt and Road Initiative through projects such as Chongqing Connectivity Initiative. So this careful balancing where Singapore supports the US security presence while embracing Chinese economic opportunities exemplifies Singapore's realist yet pragmatic approach to its survival. Singapore is able to preserve its neutrality in the ongoing US-China rivalry, managing to surreptitiously and skillfully avoid taking sides and antagonizing one of the great powers. Additionally, maintaining close relations with both dominant global superpowers gives Singapore powerful military allies, acting as a strong deterrent against potential aggressors, a form of external balancing in the balance of power approach. So secondly, from a liberalist standpoint, states can cooperate for mutual benefit and peace. For a small state like Singapore, liberalism provides the intellectual foundation for survival. Although Singapore cannot overpower the great powers militarily, it's embedded itself in a cooperative international system where rules, trade, and diplomacy matter more than size. Thus, Singapore consistently champions free trade and multilateral cooperation as structural equalizers. So Singapore's active participation in ASEAN exemplifies this strategy. So ASEAN provides a collective voice that amplifies the influence of smaller states and cushions them from external pressures. Singapore has been instrumental in shaping ASEAN's economic integration from the ASEAN Free Trade Area to the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, which brings together 15 APEC economies, including China and Japan. Through ASEAN, Singapore gains diplomatic weight far beyond its size, with decisions made through consensus, ensuring that great powers like China or the US cannot dominate ASEAN regional affairs unilaterally. Additionally, liberalism posits trade and interdependence as foundations of peace. When economies are deeply linked, the cost of conflict rises, creating incentives for stability. Singapore is one of the world's most open economies, with trade accounting for over 300% of its GDP. While being a global trade hub, Singapore ties great powers like the US and China into mutually beneficial relationships, reinforcing its relevance and importance to them, and ensuring its safety and stability through economic viability. So lastly, from a constructivist standpoint, the world is socially constructed with ideas, beliefs, and norms influencing behavior, potentially more than material factors. Hence, in a world dominated by great powers, Singapore's survival depends on how it defines itself and how it constructs its legitimacy and how the world perceives it. So, since its independence, Singapore has striven to cultivate a strong national identity and prominent international image. Singapore is a founding member of ASEAN, which institutionalizes norms like non-interference, consensus, and regional autonomy. By adhering to ASEAN norms, Singapore legitimizes its foreign policy and builds collective diplomatic weight. Singapore has also played a mediator role, successfully hosting events like the Trump-Kim Summit in 2018, reinforcing Singapore's identity as a neutral and reliable diplomatic space, and building credibility in global politics. Singapore, through consistency and ingenuity, has also garnered a reputation as an innovative and progressive global trade hub and tech powerhouse. Its smart nation digitalization, pragmatic leadership, and low corruption rates are just a few of the successes that Singapore has achieved and maintained, leading it to become a role model regionally and globally. Hence, through creating an exemplary image of itself and garnering consistent international recognition, Singapore is able to create a form of soft power, ensuring its survival by gaining the respect from the global superpowers as a role model. However, despite its successes, Singapore faces mounting challenges. The intensifying US-China rivalry tests its balancing strategy, as both powers pressure smaller states to take sides, threatening Singapore's neutral stance. The decoupling of global supply chains and rising protectionism also threatens Singapore's open economy model. Moving forward, Singapore has to invest further into current strategies or innovate new ones in the evolving global climate of international relations, or face the reality of being a small state in a world dominated by global superpowers. So, in conclusion, Singapore's survival and success in a world dominated by the global powers is neither accidental nor guaranteed, but the result of deliberate, adaptive, and multifaceted strategies grounded in the principles of realism, liberalism, and constructivism. So, realism explains how Singapore secures its sovereignty through pragmatic hedging and external balancing, maintaining robust defense ties with the US while engaging economically with China. Liberalism highlights Singapore's belief in cooperation, multilateralism, and open trade as tools for amplifying influence beyond its size. Constructivism, meanwhile, reviews how Singapore's identity as a neutral, competent, and innovative state grants it soft power and legitimacy within the global order. So together, these approaches showcase Singapore's ability not only to survive, but to thrive by mastering the art of strategic flexibility in balancing power, building cooperation, and shaping perceptions. As global tensions rise and the world grows more fragmented, Singapore's continued success will depend on its capacity to refine these strategies, staying small yet significant, and proving that even in a world ruled by giants, a small state can stand tall through wisdom, adaptability, and vision. And with that, I've come to the end of my presentation. Thank you.